Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zebra Talk, the podcast where we go beyond the stripes and shine a little light onto the lives and the untold stories of the people who slide on their knees and count the threes. That's right, I'm talking about the referees, and today I'm joined by arguably my favorite person in professional wrestling. This is the number one interview I was the most excited for this. This is one of my best friends anywhere in the world. He's been a great mentor to me for a very long time. You've seen him on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. You've seen him on Championship Wrestling from Arizona. You've seen him at PWG. You've seen him at New Japan Strong. You know, he's all over the place. He's one of the figureheads of the United Wrestling Network at this point. Thank you very much for being here today, Nick Bonanno.
Odie, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. I'm so happy to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you in a little bit of time here.
Right? So, it's wild that, you know, like we went from seeing each other like every 2 weeks or even every week to, you know, I mean, we were living together for a while and now we just never get a chance. COVID's a crazy thing, right?
That it is, my friend. I was saying is we even tried to do this in person. What was it, 2 years ago? The original, like the pilot almost of your podcast here.
Yeah, I got quite a few episodes recorded a couple of years ago, a year or two, something like that, and they were good, but you know, for one reason or another, they never really made it onto the internet. So hopefully, these will actually make it somewhere. I think the last time that we saw each other was actually that real fun Christmas evening get together that we had with Mr. Jeremy Marcus, where we got to find out how much he enjoys Goldberg.
Understandable, yeah.
It was pretty wonderful. I bet he's quite excited to see what's going on with him now with, you know, the whole Drew McIntyre storyline and everything. But this isn't about Goldberg. This isn't about WWE. This isn't about Jeremy Marcus. This is about you. So, Nick, why don't we just dive right into it and you tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about where you come from and your like early years in professional wrestling. Go right ahead.
Of course. My name is Nick Bonanno, as Odie mentioned before. I grew up on Long Island, New York. I went to Mikey Whipwreck's school, which is the New York Wrestling Connection. Mikey oversaw the curriculum, but my actual head trainers were Pat Buck, Tony Nese, and Alex Reynolds. And that's where I kind of got my start. I trained as a wrestler first. I knew I wanted to be a referee, but I trained as a wrestler. That was 10 years ago, 2010, almost 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And wow, that's wild.
Yeah, right? You were very subtle last year about like your tenure passing by. I don't even know if you noticed, but like I was kind of loosely keeping track and I was like, I think Nick's at 10 years now.
That's the thing is like, I certainly knew that was happening. And actually, now that I think about it, the first tapings for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, once we came back from our hiatus due to the shutdown, it was in August, and August is my year mark for wrestling. Sure. So the 10-year mark was the first time I was ever officially executive producer and showrunner for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood.
That's a pretty good birthday present, if I don't mind saying so.
That's pretty. That was pretty cool.
I mean, that's a great organic transition. Like how have things been going with that? You know, for those of you who don't know, Nick is holding the keys to the kingdom with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood these days, which like kudos to you. Congratulations, man. You've put in the work and you've earned it.
Thanks, man. As you know, it's always been an interest of mine to not just to be in the ring as a referee, but to be behind the scenes. If I'm interested in a topic or a kind of activity, I want to do everything involved in that.
Absolutely.
And so for the most part, shy of actually wrestling a match myself, I feel that with Championship Wrestling, I have been able to do that.
Which I'm sure the match between you and Marcus is coming eventually. And, you know, I'll be sure to get down there to ref that.
There are several back and forth promos between New Japan of America's head official, Jeremy Marcus, and myself. We have a long-standing rivalry that actually stemmed from the fact that people always mistook him or myself for each other.
Yeah.
And constantly, like we'd get tagged in stuff. People would just report the wrong name. So since we've been trying to differentiate a little bit, he's, down a very great fitness path right now. He's got a full beard. I have taken a different path in that I tried to do the mustache for a little bit. Now, as you can see, for those who are watching, I'm trying on a goatee just to try it on for size. There's been plenty of very respectable referees with goatees. The first one that comes to mind. So the first one that comes to mind for me is who I would call like my grand mentor, so like my mentor's mentor, and that would be Jimmy Corderas.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I mean,
so I
Jimmy
always have.
Corderas, it's definitely somebody to look up to and aspire to, resemble, I guess, Um,
uh, but yeah,
the mustache was an interesting choice. That was a fun experience to see from afar.
yeah, and ultimately it was a situation. I know a lot of people who were, once shutdown had started, no one really knew how long it might take, and we still might not know how long it takes.
Sure, yeah.
But that gave a lot of people opportunity to try different hairstyles or colors or facial hair if you're working from
Yeah,
home.
I'm really trying out a new style over here. For those of you who are listening, I haven't touched my hair.
You
But
have
anyway,
you have perfected that like swooped dome though that you got there. It's got some great volume to it,
I
which I think
mean,
is hard to
I
pull
try.
off sometimes with like a slicked back look. But it's a very sharp, I would say, classic look. 60s ish, Mad Men esque. Man,
You hit the nail straight on the head. I was looking for something to do with my appearance after I'd actually asked for some advice from some people at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, yourself included. And they said, I had a shaggy goatee at the time. I was a little overweight. I never really did anything with my hair. And they were like, if you want to be serious about this, you got to look like a professional. So, figure out something for your image. And I Googled Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and John Hamm, and they
hmm,
all had the exact same haircut, and it
yeah.
looks like this. And so I was like, all right, let's give that a shot. And I can't even tell you how many people have told me, like, the number one like compliment that I get is, "Oh, you look like a ref." I'm like, okay, well, it works.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, tell me a little bit about studying under Mikey Whipwreck and Pat Buck and Tony Nese. What was your experience in on Long Island?
Thank you for articulating that correctly. You don't. People always say in Long Island. You don't live in an island. You live on an island. So
I
I
was just
appreciate.
talking to Mark Dundee not too long ago, and he
Mhm.
was also trained and grew up on Long Island, and he emphasized that as well. And I kind of popped for it. I was like, I appreciate that you said you were on an island, but yeah, go ahead.
So a thing that I tell people, even now, is training was really hard, and
Hmm.
I think it should be difficult because it
Hmm.
really forces you to push your boundaries and see if this is something for you, and it kind of enables you to see that you are capable of doing things beyond what you even thought you might thought of previously.
Absolutely.
So that was a thing that wrestling school absolutely pulled out of me.
Hmm.
I'd been somewhat of an athlete my whole life. I always called myself like the fastest slow kid or the slowest fast kid because
Sure.
I mostly ran cross country and track. So I was always firmly like in the middle of the pack.
But you
Because
did a pretty like I don't want to say like strange, but like unique athletic background as well. Weren't you a fencer?
Yes, in a way. I'm a third degree black belt in the martial art of kendo, which is like
Mm.
Japanese fencing.
Hmm.
And so I did that is absolutely what I did. So very similar looking armor, I would say, at least the headpiece.
Sure.
Yeah, very intense what's it called?
Sparring.
Oh yes, for sure. Intense sparring it's like a mental thing as well, just like wrestling would be. And also with that, it's like it built a discipline into me, which is absolutely necessary for any kind of progress with wrestling. Um,
Definitely, which is something that I think really shines out in your execution of literally any task that you put upon yourself more than I think anything else. Like, obviously, anything that you do, the quality is going to be there, but I think the dedication and the what am I trying to say? You do everything so thoroughly, if you know what I mean. Like, you don't really cut any corners or skip any steps or anything like that. You're very consummate professional.
I hope so. I think that is something that has been kind of drilled into me in all of those senses. And that tying it back to my athletic background. So I mentioned running, I'd mentioned wrestling, I'd mentioned kendo. Those are all things that are even if it's like a wrestling team, because I did a little bit of high school wrestling.
Sure.
Even if it is on a team, those are all individual sports. So
Right.
you can't blame someone else because you finished last in the race. It's something you blame yourself for.
Yeah, the team
Um,
didn't lose, you lost. Yeah.
Exactly. At least that's certainly a way that you could frame that in a way to keep yourself motivated or to keep yourself accountable.
Sure.
And I think that's something that when it ties through all, it goes a thread that goes through all of my aspects of my life. And so when I'm trying to be thorough, it's because I'm think, okay, is someone going to pull this thread and they're going to unravel the whole thing? Are they going to do this?
Mhm.
I'm trying to make it as impenetrable as possible. And in most situations, that works out in my benefit, but it can be time consuming.
Very cool.
But
Tell me a little bit about when you realized that you wanted to do this like full time as an actual career. Was that when you made the move to Los Angeles, or were you already kind of, like going full tilt into wrestling before you had left?
No, so I would say that I didn't feel that I could do this full time as a career until I was already in Los Angeles. So I'd made the move. As
Mhm.
I had started on the East Coast. Like I said, I trained on Long Island, and I only kind of worked a couple indies in that area. So that was up until about 2014. And it wasn't really until then that I even started really branching out. I'm pretty much stuck to my home promotion and maybe one or two other places that ran at that building,
Sure.
or if we did a ring rental or something like that. Um, but until I had left New York around 2014 to move to Los Angeles, because I also work in movies and all kinds of things. I got a lot going on all the time.
Yeah, you got a lot of irons in the fire, and they're all very interesting irons too.
um, and so with that, I actually thought that I was going to give up wrestling. I didn't think that there was anything for me out here.
Sure.
And I knew that a wrestler that I had started with, or that was one of the people who helped train me, in addition to the people I had mentioned, was a guy named Papadon, Greek god Papadon,
Good
and
God, popped
the Greek god Papadon, very. And a thing that he had said, that he's like, "Oh, I'm going to be in LA in, I think it was January,"
Mhm.
and I had moved out in November. He goes, I'll hit you up when I get out there. You can meet some people." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." Not really sure if that was going to do anything.
Sure.
And it turned out that he was booked for a company called AWS, which
Mhm.
at the time was a very frequent, frequently running indie in the Los Angeles area, usually based in like Southgate,
Yeah,
for anyone who knows the neighborhoods.
very
And
popular part of the Southern California wrestling scene.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Papadon was friendly with that promoter, and so I'd gone there just to hang out. And I think he and I did a workout beforehand, Papadon and I. And at that time, he just happened to say, "Oh, hey, I think there's a Championship Wrestling from Hollywood show tomorrow. Let me call David Marquez and see if he needs a ref." I'm like, "Oh, that would be amazing."
Sure.
Luckily for me, uh, all the refs who usually worked at Championship Wrestling were at Lucha Underground that weekend. So Rick Knox and Justin Borden. So he had they were needing another ref,
Yeah.
and I was at the right place at the right time. It was the day of the Royal Rumble that year, I remember,
Mhm.
and
So the house
luckily
was a little light.
luckily I was I didn't fall on my face. But once I got there and was there for at least a couple of months, it started feeling like, oh, okay, because it wasn't just um, okay, this is go to the ring, hit the mat, things like that. Because as I'm sure Odie, you've seen with the other, or have talked to with the other referees you're interviewing for all of these, it comes up very frequently that like there isn't really no ref training, or at least there didn't used to be.
Sure. Yeah.
So if I got any kind of feedback in the previous 4 years when I first started, it was just to be yelled at. It was like,
Yeah.
how'd you not know not to do the thing I didn't tell you not to do? I don't know
Why
how I
aren't
didn't
you
know that.
psychic? Why didn't you just know without me telling you anything?
Yeah, and
And then alternatively, of course, the classic, oh, well, I just didn't see you, so, you did a good job.
right, which is I'd say equally as invaluable, or sorry, is unvaluable. There are times,
Invaluable, I think.
yeah, there are times when that is a great compliment, and there are times when that doesn't help you at all. And a lot of times when you are first starting out, some kind of feedback is a little bit better than maybe nothing. But
Sure. And I think like even if it is a good compliment, like you don't necessarily need a compliment in those settings. You need help.
yes,
You know
for
what I
sure.
mean? So like even if it is meant to come from a good place, like it's not helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah. But anyway, so you're at Hollywood now. Things are moving right along. Tell
Things are
me how you
moving.
transitioned into the head referee role. How long were you actually there before I got there? I think I got there in like February of 2016.
So if you got there around then, I would have been there for about a year. I'd started
Okay.
January of 2015,
Mhm.
and I would say I got the role of head referee in the sense that what's it called? I There weren't consistent referees there at the time, because
Sure.
even the head referee at Hollywood would have been Patrick Hernandez,
Mhm.
amazing referee,
Yeah.
someone who helped me out a lot when I first got to Hollywood. And anyone you ask could say enough nice things about Pat. I'm sure we'll talk more about him in a little bit.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
he, at his job, at his day job, was taking on a lot more responsibility, so he wasn't able to get out to the Hollywood tapings as much. And so it was usually me and then somebody else or two
Mhm.
other people kind of randomly. Because
But
even
always
Jeremy
consistently
Marcus,
you, obviously. Go ahead.
yeah, I say because even Jeremy Marcus at the time was coming off of injuries, and so he
Right.
wasn't as quick to be in there, and he wasn't there all the time.
Yeah, he had
And
just had
so
that really wild title concussion situation go on, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that is, yeah, at least one of them. I don't know if they had two back to back. I'd have to ask him exactly
For
what the
people who don't
timeline
know
was.
what we're talking about, we didn't actually touch on this in Jeremy's, and I won't take too much of your time. But yeah,
Please.
Jeremy has unfortunately suffered some pretty serious injuries in his career, and been quite a champ coming back from them. At some point, somebody threw a championship belt into the ring and inadvertently like cracked his skull. He's bleeding and concussed and all that stuff. And yeah, it almost took him out of the career that he has now. But kudos to him for pulling it all together. But please continue.
Yeah, and I would also emphasize that was an accident. That wasn't
Yeah,
supposed to.
yeah,
It
no,
wasn't
of
supposed to
course
hit
they
him in the
didn't do it
head.
on purpose. Yeah, no, they
Yeah.
just tossed the belt into the ring. They didn't realize it was gonna, almost kill Jeremy.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
um. So essentially, I noticed that I was the only person who was consistently there. I'd say for the first 6 months I was there. So
Sure.
I just decided I'm the senior official here now. And I'm like, if someone questions it, I will change that. But until someone does, that's my title. And I said that to a guy
I'm
named Mike
questioning it
Mongoose.
right now. I'm questioning it. You're no longer the senior official. You're the head of the company. I'm the senior official now.
Okay, so you haven't officiated a United Wrestling Network match in at least a year, maybe about
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah.
I would give it to Scott Johnson based on the minimum requirements for officiating in the
I
United
haven't
Wrestling
refed
Network.
any match in almost a year. I shouldn't be the head ref anywhere. But anyway, talk to Mike Mongoose. Please continue.
You'll always be the head referee of my heart, Odie. So
Oh,
just know that.
shucks.
Um, anyway, so I talked to Mike Mongoose, who was one of the producers at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, also extremely helpful to me in my early days going on there. Mike had been an official at Ring of Honor. He was a promoter himself. He has another person who has a lot of irons in the fire.
Mhm.
And I mentioned that to him. I'm like, I'm the senior official now, and he goes, "Okay, yep, I don't have a problem with that."
Yeah.
And yeah, because he
Sounds
was
just like him
always,
too. He's very, yep.
yeah. He was always because he was also well, at the time he was the person who was speaking to the referees through our earpieces as well. So
Sure.
if you're gonna if there are any ref questions, usually it would go to Mike, and he would give us good notes too. Yeah, so there's that. So then I was kind of in charge, and with the duties of being the head official at the time. I'm sure I was still doing ring crew quite a lot and kind of trying to get that going
Mhm.
as a kind of the head person there and doing rep assignments and things like that, which whoever I was lucky enough to have with me as referees for that day. And then eventually I just kind of started taking on more responsibility. I was offered to come in as like an office person to help write the show.
Sure.
And I just continued to progress from there. So
And things have just kind of like rolled organically, like almost like a slow avalanche or snowball or something like that. Like when I
yeah.
came along, you were uh, specifically just the head referee, but then, obviously, like you were saying, you moved into the writer role, and then eventually you moved into the head of the promos and production, all of that. Is there any role that you have enjoyed the most outside of your job as referee? Is there any role that
Ooh.
you maybe didn't really enjoy so much?
I mean, because there's both sides of the coin to each of those roles.
Sure.
I given in like an infinite amount of time, I like doing location promos a lot. So ones
Yeah.
that are not just at the interview space, so they're somewhere else. They're outside. They're under the stairs. They're somewhere like that. Because I often talk about how I'm a big fan of atmosphere in wrestling,
Mhm.
which I always feel something that's really difficult to capture on camera. I think it's something you have to be in the room for. So in
Sure.
order to the show definitely already has its own tone,
Mhm.
and if you go in for like I would say like a real TV show. So that's not what I mean. What I mean is if you say if I was directing like an episode of Supergirl or something like that, they take you
Sure.
in for what's called a tone meeting, which is they say this is how we do the show, this is what it's like, blah 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 blah. So that you don't come in and takes because they have so many different directors in charge for different episodes.
Take
Like
6 hours just trying to figure out what the tone is.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so Hollywood has a very established tone, I feel. And
Mhm.
so, in order to ways that you can break from that are in situations where you could take what we're used to seeing and put it somewhere else. Um,
Before we continue in that, for the people who maybe aren't necessarily familiar with what that means, can you go a little bit more in detail about like what the tone of a show is and give examples of like what you mean specifically for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood?
oh yeah. Okay, so for what I'm thinking about tone of the show, it's sort of how it feels as a viewer. So if you're watching Championship Wrestling from Hollywood,
It's
it
very
should not.
bright, it's very colorful.
Exactly, very
Go
bright,
ahead,
very colorful,
continue.
has a specific color palette, lots of
Right.
whites, lots of reds. It's
Lots of blue.
Yeah, I'd say red, white, blue are like very common. Not to say that those aren't common in other promotions or anything like that. But as far as TV products, like you watch Hollywood and then you watch, say, SmackDown. SmackDown's all blue. Raw is all red.
Right.
NXT is
Right.
black and yellow.
Right.
Those are things that establish the tone of that show. So it gives it a feel, and it makes it in a way that's undeniably what you're doing. If I were to come in and decide that the show is orange now, it's going to make the viewer question what they were watching, and maybe they'll change the channel.
Yeah. They
And
might not
so,
even realize it at first, why it feels so strange, but like it would definitely seem very off.
yeah. And color is an example of that. So there's other things too. The camera style, I would say, the way that the show is cut together or directed live, and those are all different ways to establish the tone of the show, and so that to get the viewer engrossed in the action in a way that they are used to. If they've seen the show before, or if they haven't seen the show, it's a way for them to easily slip into the way that the show is able to digest.
Sure.
Um,
So you like creating an atmosphere. You like
yes.
having a tone that you create. Let's continue back where you were. You like doing location shots. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I like doing location shots. One that I didn't direct myself, but I helped put together, that was aired on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood within the last year, is okay. So we have this thing called the PP3 Cup. It's one of Paul Bearer's urns on a trophy stand.
Mhm.
And what it serves was, it was essentially like a Money in the Bank situation. So you could take
Right.
the person who won the cup could then get a title shot whenever they wanted. On the first episode that we had back, or the second episode, was the first day of shooting. I had two of our villain characters, so Uptown Andy Brown and Adrian Quest, stole the cup from the person who had won it, and they literally threw it into the Pacific Ocean, because where we shoot is directly across the street from the beach. So we had
Right.
them go to the pier and dump it throw it into the water, and we had like a student waiting down in the water below.
Which like
Um,
how spoiled are we that we get to shoot right across from the beach? And like how unfortunate is it that we don't shoot on that beach more often?
I
So
agree
like
with that.
kudos to you for taking advantage of the location that we're in.
Yeah, because I always want to do more of that. It's there, but once you go outside, though, there are other issues that present themselves. Sound is
Right.
always an issue,
Right.
and then
You can never control who's around or what the light
right,
is going to be like. Yeah, of
um,
course.
light being another thing that you have to think about. You have to figure out with the camera, if do the iris, or blah blah blah, blah, more technical things. Um, I'm not an amazing technician with the camera. I can kind of describe what I'm trying to do, and usually I have someone, Logan or another camera master, put it together. But those are things that you need to think about. Um,
So they tossed it into the ocean. You've
so they
got a
tossed it in
student
the
down there
ocean,
waiting to grab the urn because we don't want to actually lose Percy's urn.
right? And so what I was able to create, because you could argue that, in terms of like the amount of light in the shot is the same as it would be in the ring. But what that's able to do in terms of atmospheric things is it changes the way that you're supposed to feel when you're watching it. Because a thing that concerns me, for people who have been watching our show for a long time, is that they might not be reacting as much as they used to, because they're kind
Sure.
of seeing a lot of the things that they've seen already.
Sure.
Which is
Yeah.
wrestling in general. The genre is very self-reflective and very, I'd say, self-repeating, because usually when things work, you keep doing them that way.
Right. But
And
there
so,
is a point where like if you are just kind of on autopilot for, X number of months, years, however long, it shows, it comes across. It looks like you're
of
copy
course,
pasting one show to another.
and that's not what I want to do at all.
Sure.
And so, and again, I'm trying to run this. If you haven't figured this out by now, people who are paying attention to this, I'm trying to run Championship Wrestling from Hollywood like a TV show as opposed to like a wrestling show.
Right.
Again, my background is in television, films, music videos, and things like that, commercials. So I'm always thinking about what the frame looks like, and not necessarily just what moves are happening. So in order to help tell that story, I wanted them to literally throw the cup into the Pacific Ocean, and so they did that. And that enabled us to take a second where we're still establishing where we are, because we know that where we're shooting is across the beach. We do reference it from time to time. One of our major events of the year is called Coastline Clash. It's like we weren't
Right.
on the coastline, we wouldn't call it that.
Right.
And so, those are ways that I was able to take the tone that we have, change the atmosphere of it, and then progress that story. So that is what I'm looking to do as, the head of this show.
Coming in to revolutionize television and wrestling one show at a time. Are there any moments that have stuck out in your mind? Let's say like your favorite match, or like what kind of match styles do you really enjoy doing? Maybe not necessarily just at Hollywood, but in general as a
Mhm.
referee. Like do you have standout matches? Go ahead and talk to me about that a bit.
Of course. I would say my favorite type of match, just in general, to referee. I would say it's very common. It's just like a standard tag team match where there are defined heels and defined baby faces.
Sure.
Because I find that there's a lot for the referee to do,
Mhm.
and I have a lot of fun when I do those. And so, in doing
I
things like
really
that,
appreciate that because a lot of referees will not only say that they really enjoy singles matches, which like I'm guilty of that. I love a singles match. But a lot of referees actually kind of shy away from tag team matches because they're maybe not necessarily able to control things as well as they would like to. And, like I agree, like a very good tag team match can be like a work of art, a thing of beauty, as long as
agreed.
everybody's cooperating and working together. But go ahead and touch on that. Go into
Yeah,
detail.
no, absolutely. Uh, I've certainly had many more tag team matches that have frustrated me endlessly than I have
Mhm.
ones that like I said, that would be works of art, like you were saying just there. Um, and it always comes down to who you're in there with, and if you could help tell that story to the best of your ability, I think the referee really does help a good tag team match, especially with the heat and everything like that.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite things, I don't know if I figured it out or just I remember when I started doing it, was during and a tag team match on Big False Finishes. I started noticing where the person who's getting pinned, where his partner or her partner is, because almost always they're going to slide in and break it up. So if I'm going down for a pin and I notice that the person is behind me where I am now, but I could still see the shoulders, I'll hop over here so that they can make that clean pin, that clean
Sure.
break, and they
Yeah.
don't
I
have
mean,
to jump over me or whatever. No one gets
that's
kicked in the
job
head.
number one is not getting in the way, right?
Yeah. And in those situations, though, like you said, there's so much going on, or there could be so much going on, and that it could take away from just the momentum of everything, the feeling of how it's going to go, and that then cuts from the audience reaction, which then brings the whole match down a little bit.
Right.
So you want to finagle your way into it so that it doesn't, it works to the
Stall
best
the
for
timing or anything like that. Yeah.
exactly. Is then to you could have. I remember recently I was watching an event where on paper I thought the tag team title match was going to steal the show, and unfortunately the referee who was assigned to it wasn't given. They weren't like basically set up to succeed,
Sure.
and so which I didn't feel like that was the right moment for that. There's certainly moments because when I first started, like I said, I get yelled at a lot, and so
Mhm.
one of the things I would get yelled at was they're not being aggressive enough during tag team matches. And so
Right.
I ended up the senior official where I started. This guy named Steve Forge. He put me in just tag team matches for like 6 months, and I got better at them.
Yeah.
But
Which is
and
a style that you have now as a senior referee.
yes, and like I said, now I love tag team matches. But that was something I had to learn by doing live events essentially. I was, but again, I was watching this match where it should have been the show stealer, and unfortunately, it wasn't because the referee who was put into the match didn't have the opportunity to really, show their skill set the way that told the story of the match as best as it could have.
Sure.
And therefore, there were some moments in the match that became clunky, and that didn't play off the way that the story should have been played, or that the performers wanted it to best come out. And so, I wouldn't say that that was that person's fault necessarily, as much as the situation. But you have to make sure that you can. In most cases, we can control the situation. I don't mean specifically like me as the one ref, but like the team of people putting the show together.
Yeah.
If you're looking at this and you're saying this is going to be good, but we need all these things to happen, you can make those things
Address
happen.
that.
Address
Talk
it
about it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that blew me away the most, you know that I come from a theater background, and
Mhm.
when I first came into wrestling, the idea that there's not really like there's a booking meeting often before the show start or something like that, but the fact that there's no rehearsal, there's no walkthroughs, there's no any kind of that. Everybody just is like, all right, you versus you, go. It's insane, and like to expect that many moving parts to function fluidly and professionally and perfectly without really any kind of like anything beforehand is insane. But I mean, it's one of the more beautiful things about professional wrestling. You know, it's like improvised stage combat taken to the like next level.
Um, I'd say so. As far as my matches that I've done, I don't necessarily have a specific tag team match that I can point to and say this is my favorite tag team match that I've done.
Sure.
I do have. I mean, I have a couple recent matches that I just that are singles matches that I do think I did a good job and the match came off really well. A great example of that would be what got ended up getting voted the 2020 New Japan Strong Match of the Year, which was Tom Lawler versus Fred Rosser,
Look at
which
you
I was
go.
I want to say which I was lucky enough to be the official for,
Very cool.
and it was very intense. So like we were talking about just a moment ago about having all the intensity of having the bodies of having a big tag team match where you're just trying to get out of the way and you're doing all these
Mhm.
things. That match was so the Tom Lawler and Fred Rosser match was just as involved, but for completely different reasons. So
Yeah,
these guys were grappling. They were doing as much as they can. They were down on the mat in each other's faces, exchanging holds, coming back, just pure intensity, up and down the whole time. Certainly, I would say the sweatiest match that I refereed last year as well. It's just like
sure.
you could just see strikes and just like clouds of sweat bursting off of people.
Yeah.
And so by the time that it got to the ending, and basically Tom Lawler had tied up Fred in a way that he was in almost like a couple of holds at once
Mhm.
and could not defend himself. I ended up, kind of diving in and calling it off as a rep stoppage. That it was at the peak of where it needed to be. So it wasn't. They built it in such a way that it drew the interest of the viewer. It was very much strong style, if you want to put it that way.
Mhm.
But I told the story that they were telling because there are storylines within that program, and it to the point where Fred didn't quit. He had like the match had to stop.
Yeah.
And so that was my role, is to make sure that that was emphasized, and so I was able
Which
to do that.
opens up all kinds of different storytelling avenues that can continue off of that.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What
And
kind
again,
of
I had a lot to do. So
I'm sure. I mean, between the two of them, you do a lot of one-on-ones, even tag team matches where like you don't really feel what's the point that I'm trying to get at? You can tell when it's on that next level when you're in there with certain people that are going to be all over the ring and they're going to be
mhm.
going a million miles a second and they're on another level of intensity. You know, like the first time I ever really was aware of that was actually at Hollywood. It was a match between Jake Hager and Brian Cage. And
Mm.
not even just, these are two giant hulking mountains of, meat. Like they were going around at a million miles a second. They're flying into each other. It's very much you got to be on your toes. You got to be thinking the whole time. You got to, be really aware of everything that's going on. It's another level. Tell me a little bit about matches that you don't necessarily really enjoy being a part of.
Oh man. Okay. Uh, One before I move into that, I would just want to toss in there, since we started talking about facial hair. If you want to see Nick Bonanno with a mustache, watch that Fred and Tom Lawler match. That's a great example of Nick with a mustache.
There you
Matches that
go.
don't like are usually ones that involve a lot of
Battle
crowd
royals.
brawling. Battle royal, battle royal is not so much. I don't. That don't bother me as much. I it's Our roles are different in the battle royal. But the thing that I genuinely I would say take more umbrage with are matches that involve fighting in the crowd, or
Mhm.
have a lot of like fans bring the weapons. I refereed one of those in Los Angeles 2 years ago, last year,
Things
I
where you
think.
can't necessarily control every variable as much.
Yeah, and it becomes very concerning because it's in that sense like in those situations our job turns into crowd control.
Mhm.
And there are certainly situations where we welcome that. So like you and I were both have done Suburban Fight,
Right.
and that's a situation where we know what we're going into. So it's even if even if there's one official, one referee who's counting the pins, we usually have both of us out there, or every referee that we have out there, so
Somebody's there to
to help.
keep people safe even while there's
Yeah,
somebody else that yeah. Yeah.
exactly, because it keeps them safe, keeps us safe, keeps the wrestler safe, and it allows all of that to work cohesively. When people specifically, and it was a fans bring the weapons match. I remember one time I was at the Bootleg Theater in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
I forget who exactly was in the match, but they were kind of fighting up in the stands a little bit. There's like a little stadium seating, and also fans were standing room only around the ring. and somebody had brought like a stormtrooper helmet or something like that, and just
Mhm.
chucked it at one of the wrestlers. And like the wrestler wasn't looking, a fan chucked it, and
Yeah,
I happened to see it, and I grabbed it out of the air. And
sure.
had I not done that, it would have cracked him in the back of the head, and who knows what could have happened then. But I was, oh man, I was so upset. I just people don't necessarily think that their actions have consequences.
Yeah, definitely.
And even as a spectator. And so even again later in that match, one of the competitors was Watts, and I
Mhm.
remember that because somebody then also threw a PlayStation 3 at him, and that did hit him in the head.
Jeez.
Yes, exactly. For anyone who's ever picked one up or even looked at one, yeah,
They're
he
not
was
exactly something you want flying at your face.
definitely not. Yeah, and he was laying in the ring, after taking some move or kicking out or whatever, and
Mhm.
someone just chucked it under the rope at him, and just some fan, and it cracked him in the head, and I know he was super mad about it. And I was just as concerned, understandably. So,
Well, it
um,
stands to reason why you wouldn't really want to take part in those kinds of matches very much.
yeah, and I think within reason, there is a great creativity that goes into those matches, taking something that you weren't expecting from the crowd or from wherever, and then being able to use that in an inventive way. I'm a big fan of inventiveness among wrestlers,
Sure.
because like we said before, if people start seeing the same thing for too long, they'll lose interest, or they won't,
Yeah, I've
and
always said that regardless of who I'm rooting for in a match, regardless of how the match has been going or the storyline building up to it, if you do something I've never seen before in wrestling, I'm at least excited for that moment because there's
hmm
just been so many wrestling matches over the years that, for somebody to come up with something that nobody's ever seen before at this point is it's impressive.
yeah.
But continue.
Um, Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, inventiveness, I'm a fan of. Creativity, I am absolutely a fan of. But I'm also a fan of safety and doing things within reason. And
Yeah.
so, if
It's
there's,
pretty
yeah,
it's
if
pretty
there's,
wild that our role has to, turn into that kind of like almost safety man, so often, from influences in and outside of the ring. We've, like you were saying, done a bunch of suburban fights before together, and seen people getting tossed into each other or chairs getting flung at fans or wrestlers or whatever. There was a ladder match that I was taking part in at PWG. It was a tag team ladder match, and
wow,
somebody took a ladder while they were on the inside of the ring, and they just chucked it at somebody that was, just prone in the corner. And they didn't really think too much of it. They were just like, I'm going to hit the guy that's in the corner. But the guy in the corner puts his hands up so he doesn't get smashed in the face, and it rolls off of the top of him over to the outside of the ring and goes flying at the front row. And luckily, they had me and Justin and Rick stationed around the ring, and I just kind of jumped up and stopped the ladder. But it's wild to think about some of the like things that could potentially happen if we aren't really like there to pay attention and do our jobs.
man. I was just talking to someone about this yesterday. Surely you've seen the clip of there's the wrestler who dives
Yeah,
out of the
I know
ring, and he
exactly what you're talking about. The
and like
final
topples into the
destination
yeah,
ladder
exactly.
spot.
Let's
Yeah.
say goes through the folding chair, and like it
Yeah.
explodes, and there's just a lady sitting next to him looking down. It's like, what if there had been a fan sitting in that chair?
Yeah.
Like things. Uh, Luckily that wrestler is okay, but it would have been awful for everybody. Imagine, just I shudder to think.
Insane to think of some of the things that like, no disrespect to the wrestlers or anything like that, but some of the things that they put their bodies through, some of the things that they're willing to do for a wrestling show or a wrestling match, like it's just like, man, don't you know you have to like live the rest of your life after this? But anyway, let's move off of that. We
Yeah.
kind of talked about Pat Hernandez for a little while. We just mentioned
Yes.
Knox and Justin and everybody. Obviously, you're in a leadership role yourself now, but like you weren't always. Who did you look up to or learn from as you were progressing? Who did you study on your own, and who do you study from now? Do you have any mentors that really stand out through your experience? Go ahead.
Okay. So earlier I'd mentioned my grand mentor, Jimmy
Jimmy
Corderas.
Corderas, the
He's
goat.
yes, so someone I still very much enjoy watching his his old matches, and then even keeping up with his social media and stuff. Now he had comments on
The
things,
ref and rant,
the
man.
ref and rant. Yes.
It's great. If you guys
Um,
that are listening, referees or anybody, honestly, find Jimmy Corderas on Instagram. And it used to be daily. It's a little less often now, but he will regularly post like a little 1 minute rant about what has been going on the night before on a wrestling show. And he doesn't pull any punches, and he doesn't have any kind of like, it doesn't matter what company it was the night before. If he sees something that he doesn't really think went well, he'll talk about it. It's pretty great, and you'll learn
mhm.
a lot from it. But please continue.
And so the one of the I'm sure many referees that Jimmy had mentored was someone who was directly one of my mentors, and that's Jason Ayers, who's in
Mhm.
WWE now. And he himself, like in the ways that I have found my way into other aspects of the companies I work for, Jason is someone who has been able to do that for himself within WWE. And so that
Absolutely.
is something that I look up to a lot and try to see what his path was, even though the paths now are so much different than they used to be even 10 years ago,
Sure.
or 5 years ago,
Yeah.
or in Jimmy's case, like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I think his was like, I forget exactly what Coderas' story was, but it was almost like throw a t-shirt, throw a ref shirt at him and tell him to get in the ring.
I mean, that's
Um,
kind of how it was for a lot of those refs that have been there like forever now. Like Chad Patton was kind of the same way. He
oh, was that so?
got taken under somebody's wing, and they were just like, "Hey, you want to do it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And they taught him how to do it, and there he is. It's pretty
Um,
incredible to see the, like illustrious, like history making, groundbreaking career that people can make out of like, like yourself being in the right place at the right time.
yeah. I'd say so. In addition to Jason, another person who helped me out a lot when I was first coming up in the New York area is Sean Bennett, who's another person at
Mm-hmm.
WWE now,
Yeah,
and a good friend of Fred Rosser's actually. So when I ref Fred's matches, we usually end up talking about Bennett for a little bit,
sure.
um, and things that he likes about his style that I've tried to replicate and things like that.
Hmm.
And a thing that actually that connects my East Coast stuff to my West Coast stuff through Fred or through Sean's style was that Fred really likes when the referee is very encouraging and positive during the match. If something goes well, that to say that to the boys while they're within the match.
Sure.
And that is something I picked up off of somebody I mentioned earlier, Patrick Hernandez,
Yeah.
who was the head referee at Hollywood at the time when I first started. And was a mainstay in Southern California, PWG, every other company under the sun. Um, and that's the thing I always hear from wrestlers who had worked with him, especially earlier in their careers, was just how encouraging he was and how positively that impacted their matches and their confidence and everything.
Sure.
And so, because a lot of times the guys or the women are very involved in what they're doing. They're trying to remember spots. Maybe they got rocked from something, and they might not be too aware of how well or not well something went. So when something
Yeah.
goes really well, especially something that they were concerned about, that it gives you a little bit more gas to keep going, to drive it up, to bring up the energy, to continue what you're doing, and bring that audience, if there is an audience there, up to the speed and continue with that throughout the entirety of your match. So, the thing I'm trying to incorporate more into my act now is to be able to do that with the wrestlers. So those are things that a couple those individuals helped me kind of push into my work and continue to progress with that. So.
So now, obviously, you've transitioned more into a bit more of a leadership role. You've obviously been, the lead ref for quite a while at Hollywood, but you're, on an even higher level than that now. What kind of roles do you find yourself in as a mentor yourself? Like who do you see as like people that you've taken under your wing? Obviously, Jeremy and I have learned from you directly for
Mhm.
quite a long time. For those of you who don't know, a pull apart is when you pull two slices of grilled cheese.
Cheers.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first
Um,
got to Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Nick assigned me to a pull apart, which I had never even heard that term before. And he said it so nonchalantly and casually and so rapidly that I thought he was just saying pull apart, which I had no idea what he was talking about. So I asked him to clarify, which I was terrified to do because I thought they were just going to think I was an idiot and throw me out. And he goes, Odie, when you have a grilled cheese and you cut it in half, what do you do with it? You pull it apart. And just, yeah, it's been a great running joke for us for a long time now. But please go right ahead.
um, yeah, so I'd say for individuals who I've had the opportunity to mentor a little bit, Besides yourself and Jeremy a little bit, I would say the referees in Championship Wrestling from Arizona, notably Scott Johnson, Woody Woodruff, now Ben Hall, I believe is his work name,
Hmm.
is coming through a little bit, and to a lesser extent, Jeff Coles, because he was sort of already,
An
refereeing for
established
a
ref.
while, established
Yeah.
ref when I got to the Arizona. Scott, on the other hand, has progressed beyond my wildest expectations.
Yeah,
He's a
definitely.
tremendous referee. He's also super jacked, much like Jeremy Marcus.
Right.
And they
Not
they
unlike yourself, Nikki Bombs.
hey, it's got to keep it up. There's a thing that we'll get into probably in a few minutes, just how I feel that fitness is very important to referees now more than ever, um, as you know yourself.
Definitely.
Um,
With guys like, Joseph Mandak posting pictures where they look like a wrestler, you're just like, all right, well, I need to get on a diet and I need to start hitting my push-ups, brother.
I wasn't sure if he was in that pure tournament himself. I was like, what's
Yeah,
going on
right?
over there, right? I was like, are you
Are
okay?
are you reffing the title match or are you holding it up because you won?
Man. Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to say to mentor for those referees. A number of people who have come through Hollywood for short amounts of time. I think I've mentioned before Eddie Firth, who came in. He's done another person who's done pretty much every job at Hollywood, more on the performance side than the backstage side. But he tried to be a commentator, announcer, backstage interviewer, all kinds of things. And then one day I was the only ref, and so they said, "Teach Eddie how to referee." And then he actually picked it up very quickly, and I would just kind of tweak little things here and there, and that is another example of a person who just was able to pick it up and kind of see what it see the math. I sometimes say, like, see what you needed to do and where it needed to go and why. So yeah,
Mhm.
so those
You've
guys.
actually got a new crop of referees that you've sort of taken under
Yeah.
your wing now as
Yes,
well.
I do. So in being able to move out of the ring full time, or on a smaller basis, to not be refereeing as much for Hollywood at least, and for Arizona and for any of the United Wrestling Network pay-per-views. We have a new crop of referees. I'd mentioned not a new to us, but Scott Johnson has been very helpful to our referees here at Hollywood. We also have Chad Rico, who is a newer referee who's progressing quite a lot. We have Allison Lee, who has been established for the last, I'd say, year or so on the scene.
Yeah.
She's been taking great notes, and she's been progressing daily, I would say, constantly
Yeah,
working on stuff, constantly asking
absolutely.
questions, a true student, much like yourself. And of course, there's Andrew Edmonston, who, if I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but that was someone who I met networking on a WrestleMania trip. The last
Mhm.
time that Mania was in New Orleans, I met him at a Wildcat wrestling show, and gave him my card and said, "Hey, if you want to come out to Hollywood, I'd love to, I'd love to get you some TV time."
Next
And
thing
he
you know,
did.
he moves to Hollywood.
Yeah, after he flew himself probably 6 times, if not more,
Yeah.
from Louisiana to Los Angeles, which is not a cheap airfare by any sense, and to get the TV exposure. And so in doing that, eventually he moved out, and now he lives in the San Diego area,
Mhm.
and is able to come up to our tapings constantly. So,
I think it's easy for us to lose sight a little bit because, like obviously I wasn't exactly living in LA, and Scott's not living in LA or anything like that, but it's easy for us to lose sight of how big of a deal championship wrestling from Hollywood is just because we're so used to being around it, being able to
Mhm.
work on it and things like that. I mentioned during Scott's interview actually that Jeff Coles,
Mhm.
had a long, like luscious head of hair for quite a long
Yeah.
time in his lifetime. And, it was one of his biggest goals in his wrestling career to be able to referee on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And it was not something that the powers that be were okay with him having to be on the television show. So he cut his ponytail off to
Mhm.
be on the show. Andrew flew himself from New Orleans to be on the show. Like it's good to have those reminders of like just how important and how lucky we are to be in an area that has such a they call California maybe the like land that wrestling forgot, but like honestly
Mhm.
Southern California is a hotbed for professional wrestling if you really think about it.
Yeah, I think there is a great amount of opportunity here,
Absolutely.
which is not even just from a TV perspective. Not even from just the TV point of view perspective. And so, for anyone who's tuning into this, if you're interested in working in championship wrestling from Hollywood, please get in touch with me, and we might be able to make something work. Because
Absolutely.
I've mentioned many referees in the last couple of minutes who have worked with us. But I will always say that any referee who has spent any amount of time working for Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, for Arizona, for United Wrestling Network in some capacity has gotten better.
Yeah,
I 100% believe that, and because I
couldn't
can
agree more.
see it in real time. So especially
Scott and
if
I,
you're trying to get, yeah, I'd say especially if you're trying to get break to another level, or if you're even if you're just trying to get a good tape of a match you've had, because like footage doesn't like there's so many indies that we've all worked that the footage doesn't look good. But you'll get a professional, a professional video, uh, and you'll get TV experience and meet more people, etc. So when it's safe to do so, we are going to be going back into production hopefully very soon in order to continue making the television program. So
very cool. Yeah, just to jump onto what you're saying, Scott and I, Jeremy and I, we've all talked about regularly just how much the influence, not necessarily just being at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, is had on us as referees, but just having someone like yourself who, not to blow smoke or anything like that, you're a wonderful mentor and everything, but literally anyone that has experience over where you're at in the role that you're at imparting knowledge onto you, is something that not a lot of referees get to have in their career.
mhm.
And it definitely shows how it has affected us and even just like our wrestling community over the last, like 5, 6 years. Um, let's talk about goals a little bit.
Sure.
You have accomplished a hell of a lot in your career, and you still are, almost daily. Talk to me about some of the, like standout goals that you've crossed off of your list, and what's still left on your list at this stage in your career.
Okay, so some of the goals that I've been able to cross off. We're working on television. I was able to cross off 2015 when I came out to California. One that I was not sure I would ever cross off would have been doing a show internationally, like a big international trip, which I was able to do in 2018. I got to do the NWA World's Championship in China, which was a huge achievement for me,
Absolutely,
personally,
and not
professionally,
even
everything.
just for you, is a huge achievement for professional wrestling.
Yeah, it'd never been done before. There's never been a world's title match from the NWA in mainland China. It never happened. Um, so that was a huge thing to scratch off the list. My current role as executive producer, like running the show, was something I always wanted to do and had not had the opportunity up until that point to do in the capacity that I am now.
Sure.
So those are things I was able to do. Um, I'd say for future goals, I would like to continue, seeing more parts of the world through wrestling. That is something I absolutely would like to continue pursuing. And I would say what I'm doing now, where I'm able to referee and produce at the same time, and is not something that I'm finding is you're always able to do in other companies.
Sure.
Um, so my goal right now is to get into, in addition to doing Hollywood, or once if I end up moving on from that, if I'm able to get into a bigger company, I would like to kind of form my own role, which is to, if even if it's not right away, I would like to both be involved in refereeing and in producing side of things. Which pretty much everyone that I've talked to has said you have to choose a path, which is
Yeah.
fair. But sometimes one of those paths opens the door for other paths.
Sure.
So that is
As you were talking about in the case with Jason and other people, and obviously yourself
exactly.
specifically, like you've definitely blazed that trail at Championship Wrestling from Hollywood.
Yeah.
Gun to your
Don't
head, if you
I'd say
really had
don't
to. Go ahead.
Sorry, I want to say one thing. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're just a referee. That's
Sure.
not the case.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the worst things that you could say to a referee. um, gun to your head, if you really had to come down to the choice, showrunner or referee,
Where are we talking?
wherever you want. Let's say you can produce WrestleMania or you can ref it.
I'm gonna ref that.
Yeah. I feel like, as amazing as it is to be able to be creative and to be, pulling the strings behind the scenes, like there's nothing really comparable to being in there and experiencing
Hmm.
that energy and that electricity and the momentum. And yeah, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Uh, well, we're winding down a little bit. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about anything that you feel like the audience maybe hasn't been able to see. I want you to take the time to tell them about your social media. If there's any shows that you think that they should be checking out or that you have already taken part in that they should go back and take a look at. If there's any wrestlers that you think that, maybe haven't
Ooh.
really gotten a fair look from the world, please talk about them. If you have any merch, whatever, even if it's Hollywood merch, like this is your time,
Mhm.
take a few minutes, put over whatever you need to get over.
Oh man, that's such a great window to talk about anything.
Yeah,
First,
it's
I'd
your
like to
time.
talk a thing that I have to talk about every time I get on something like this is things that I think referees should do outside of actually training, which is I
Yeah, we
think
didn't even touch on ballet or Renaissance painting or anything, which
that's what I'm
is
going to
a
talk about
shame. But
right
go
now.
ahead. But please go ahead.
Um, so yeah, okay. So I always tell people do things that are related to wrestling but aren't wrestling. So Odie just brought up ballet. I had after they always say it ain't ballet, it's kid, blah 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 blah. I encourage you to study ballet. I did it for I just did a quick intensive for 6 weeks 2 summers ago, last summer.
Mhm.
And I found that to be incredibly helpful. Once it's kind of safe to kind of get back into things, I'm absolutely looking at other classes because I would really like to continue with that.
Let
Um,
me just back that up real quick. Let me give you a very short list of
mhm.
former ballet studiers who are referees now. Nick Bonanno, Aubrey Edwards, myself. Come on, study ballet. But go ahead.
I like talking to Aubrey about refereeing and TV stuff, but I love talking to her about ballet
Mhm.
because that's always something. That's we're always like, which wrestler should we get to do ballet? I was just talking to Danny. I was talking to Danny Limelight about how he would be great at it. I think it would
Sure,
really help the kind of style that he has because he already has sort of a hybrid style.
sure.
And if footing or anything like that is a concern of his, that is something that could tighten all that up. And I know
Imagine,
because I was saying,
imagine the Rascals is in ballet class. Come on.
yeah,
Anyway,
no,
continue.
I agree with that too. Uh, and so, what's it called? So like, and I know for someone like Danny who has a military background, I know he has the discipline in him already to do it. And luckily, because he's already in very good shape,
Mhm.
it's not him, having to suck it in and have ballet posture and do all that. Though it'll be difficult because it's something he hasn't done before. It's something that is already built within him. So I think there's a lot of wrestlers who have that ability, and referees for that matter, because we are trying to get
Definitely.
around more. I mentioned how important I think fitness is, and so, but you can't do ballet if you're completely out of shape.
Right.
And so in doing that, but it will also, hone those skills that you'll need to get in the ring and your footwork and all that, being light on your feet. I sometimes say I like referees who move like nuns, where it's sort of like you don't see like the big steps. It's sort of like almost like glide.
Yeah.
And I think, and ballet is certainly something that I hope has made me less lumbering, but that was the idea, is that it would help me get better at that. Um, moving on from there, another old art form, literal art form as well, that I felt would be helpful to referees is I study paintings, specifically Renaissance and little post Renaissance stuff, to look at how they're composed and see like how they're actually structured. So my favorite painter is a person named Caravaggio, who worked a lot in like triangle formation or
Mhm.
pyramidal, depending on who you ask. Where and if you're a referee and you're working a singles match, everything you're doing is in a triangle formation. If you think about it, it's a two guys here, a two, and then there's you. So where you are, it will change. But especially if you're trying to get to that biggest level or to a bigger level, or just work on TV in your own home promotion, knowing where you are and what level you're at, literally, like not like a professional level, but like literally how where you are in the ring, and thinking about where you are on the camera is super important. I was just telling a referee yesterday who had done an NWA title match recently, that if he got down for submissions and stuff, they could push in on that camera and make it that you could see the drama almost through the referee. So
Right.
for folks who aren't able to get the anguish of the actual wrestler's face, the referee being right down there as opposed to looking down and being like, "Do you give up?" Blah blah blah. Like it helps guide the eye.
Not to
Because the
mention levels are very important, and that's
yeah,
something that we found, or I experienced in theater, which I'm sure you've experienced yourself. But like
I do. Yeah.
the eye is naturally drawn to whoever is physically highest
Hmm.
in any kind of scene. So if two people are down on the ground, rolling around in a submission or something like that, and the referee is just standing there looking down at them, people are going to naturally be drawn to the person that's standing. Like, why is he standing? But
Hmm.
anyway, please continue.
Let's say, but if you're able to bring it down, like that's again levels are something that though I learned a little bit with theater and things like that. Jason Ayers is the person who made the light bulb go off to putting that into wrestling. Another thing, I want to say Mike Yoda told me that the last time I was able to get notes from him is that coming down for a pin or for I think it was specifically a submission. Sometimes he'll even bring an arm up and then kind of bring it down like that so that it
Mhm.
catches that eye and brings it down to whatever we're supposed to be looking at,
That's
that
good.
face.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing I'm trying to do. So that's another. Those are both things. those are all things that I have pulled from art, or I can see and study, because you can't always. Sometimes when you're watching TV wrestling, you can't always see the referee, even
Sure.
though unless yeah, even though like that's what we're trying to do, is not necessarily stay in all the shots and things like that. You still want to be able to know where they are, in the back of your head.
Yeah.
And so a way that you can do that without doing that is to look at paintings and things like that. See how see what the story is just by the way that you're standing or positioning yourself.
Study
Um,
Caravaggio, kids.
yes. Okay, so those are things I wanted to emphasize, for individuals to check out themselves.
Mhm.
You mentioned before, what was it? People who I think could deserve a little love, or just things I want them
Yeah,
people
I
to know
mean,
about.
any shows that you think people should take a look at, any wrestlers that you think maybe they should discover if they haven't had a chance yet, make sure you include your own social media so people can find you and learn from you as well.
Of course, my social media, I'm at Nicholas Bonanno. That's NicholasBonanno, and that's Twitter and Instagram are the places I interact the most. So I would get me there. And so shows that I invite people to check out, of course, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. We just celebrated our 500th episode, so we have a 10-year back catalog. It's on Fight TV. It's also more widely broadcast, syndicated on over 130 television stations around the United States and around the world as well.
Mhm.
So there are ways to do that. Championship Wrestling from Arizona as well. The United Wrestling Network Primetime Live. We did a pay-per-view series that we'll be returning to very soon, and I think that you could still catch replays of that on Fight. And there might be some matches coming up on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, depending on if you're going back. If you go back
COVID
and
restrictions.
yeah, if you're able to go back when you're watching. Of course, New Japan Strong is something I've been very lucky enough to be able to be included on. So that's a different style, but with some of the same guys.
Mhm.
I feel like some of the wrestlers who I would want to bring up are now kind of starting to blow up a little bit. So
Sure.
I mentioned Danny Limelight before. Another person that I would have mentioned would have been Russ Taylor, or Tyler Rust, who is in NXT.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the people that I want to talk about are people who are about to be picked up potentially. I assume, and or are people who have been picked up already. So the person of all of that, I feel like fits into that kind of category is someone I actually thought of earlier when I was talking about inventiveness in wrestling, and that would be a guy named Kevin Martinson,
Yeah,
who
absolutely. BHK.
I always feel it's unfortunate. If you watched PWG 10 years ago, he wrestled as Johnny Goodtime with the
Mhm.
Rockness Monsters with Johnny Yuma. But he is like infinitely talented. I would say destructively inventive or dangerously
Mhm.
inventive, in a way that like all the wrestlers at Hollywood are supposed to follow certain rules. The only exception is Kevin Martinson. He's
Mhm.
allowed to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
I mean, in like cameras and stuff.
He's a
Um,
savant, he's like
I
somebody
agree.
that like, yeah, he just is on another level. Like, yeah, we're not there to tell Kevin how to do things. We're just kind of there to point a camera at him and see what he comes up with.
Yeah. So I hope people get to see more of Kevin Martinson, in whether it's checking him out online, because he didn't have a big online presence for a long time, but he's been on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood since day one.
Mhm.
Has been consistent throughout the series, and it has been other places as well. He's been all over. He's been all over the country. He's been to Japan. He wrestled in China, I think a year or two ago as well. So he's someone who I really hope gets more of a glance at him while he's still in wrestling. So because
Mhm.
he's someone who's like I
Worth
think everyone will
watching.
fall. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think
All
of.
right. Well, I think that's probably all that we have time for now, but thank you so much for being here, my friend, my very, very good friend. I'm so happy to have you on here. You're obviously one of the first names out of the hat for me. I really enjoyed my time here with you. It's always a pleasure to have a chance to have a chat with you. For those of you who are watching, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. If you would like to contribute to the Zebra Talk Fund, you can find us at prowrestlingtees.com/Zebra Talk. We have sweaters, we have t-shirts, we have hats. Nick has to hear about all my decision making for all of these things. He's very gracious with his time for me. I really appreciate it. If you would like to be featured on the show, if you're a referee, please feel free to email me at zebratalk123@gmail.com. That is also where you apply to the Zebra Talk Fund once a month. You can find us on all the social medias at ZebraTalk123. If you are a ref and you're not already part of Zebra Talk, please find me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Odie1Canody, and I'm on Facebook at Robert Odie Brown. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And again, thank you, Nick, for your time and for all of the help that you've given me over the years. You're very, very gracious and generous with your time and your knowledge. So thank you.
My pleasure, Odie. Cheers.
See you guys.